Hi everyone, my name's Ethan Barclayanu and I'm the owner of Get Flocked Knitting in Christchurch, New Zealand. I am on vacation right now and taking a little break, but I'm bringing you these 4 pre-recorded episodes that all share something a little bit different about my knitting or about what's been going on at the shop or some other great things that I've encountered in knitting that we might not even have at the shop. So I'm going to share a little bit about what's been going on with my knitting journey and other things in knitting with you each week. A tour of some of my favorite things that I've been working with lately, a few of the days, and often some information about how projects have helped shape the way that I view my knitting today. If you like any of these videos and you're looking for something more in-depth in your knitting diet, please do consider joining the Flock Online. It is undergoing a renaissance as I shift into a new framework for it that is making a focused decision to ensure that we are making the process of making the center of the attention. So with all of that said, thank you so much for joining me on the channel. I do hope that you will like and subscribe. Please tell your friends about Get Flocked, even if they don't knit. Some people might find it entertaining. I will be back with my regularly scheduled Christine after this vacation hiatus, and I cannot wait to see what she has made. Thank you all of you again for watching, and I will see you when I'm back. Hi everyone. Thanks for joining me again for this little podcast episode while I am away on vacation. We may or may not be visited by Baudelaire, as you may have already surmised. So, I'm here today to talk to you about an endangered species in our knitting, the shawl. Specifically, the big, beautiful shawl, if you will. Several years ago, a friend of mine named Marie at an event mentioned that the number of these big, beautiful shawls that you were seeing at events was dwindling. In my opinion, there are several reasons why this has occurred. And I'm here to talk to you about the changes in my shawl knitting that some of these things are going to show you and how we can use improved and different yarn selection to make better shawl choices by looking at 3 case studies of recent shawls that I've either knit or reknit. Just to let you know, if you are a subscriber to the Flock Online, there is a bonus episode of this with another 10-minute segment about an additional shawl for Flock Online subscribers only that I am putting up at the same time as this. So if you want a little bit of a bonus on how to get ahead on some of your shawl knitting for the year, you may want to subscribe there, but we will talk about that over there at the Flock Online. So thank you so much for joining me and Bobo, who's right here. And we're going to talk to you about the changes in shawl knitting. Let's get into it. Many, many moons ago, big, beautiful shawls and lots of hand-dyed yarns were the thing. Hand-dyed yarns for quite a while were relatively reasonably priced, even for large projects, so that you could get a lot of things done. There was a wide era of popularity of learning to blend and mix colors together to make fades in order to make the most out of purchasing at yarn festivals and at yarn shops, where the variety and selection of hand-dyed yarns and repeat colors may be severely different depending on where you were regionally. However, there being lots of colors, especially with speckles and other things rising in popularity over the 2010s, that you could put together to make different blended ones that worked out as fades. This led to a lot of development of specific patterns that were designed to work well with those yarns that lead to very beautiful outcomes. However, they are definitely specific to the time period, and over time the cost of those has increased greatly. I think as well, more people today are making garments that they wear instead of shawls, and that has significantly shifted what designers in general, with specific exclusion to a couple of shawl specialists, are focusing on at the moment. Although you're seeing more and more designers simply going ahead and designing garments. Please hold on while I retrieve my French bulldog from his bed to talk to us for the rest of this episode. Blessed by Bobo again. One of these shawls is a repeat and will be presented as a case study, but I thought it'd be fun to go back through some of the knitting I've done and tell you about the things that I absolutely love about some of the shawls I'm going to show you and discuss why I think they're not being made and how we can make different choices that align more with our knitting today to end up with beautiful shawl results that will fit in better with what we're doing. And to remember that shawls are a great, useful accessory. Not only are they beautiful and can add a lot to a wardrobe in many different ways, but they also offer us a great time to play with color and try out some things that we might not want to do on a garment necessarily. It can also be a great way to improve your technical knitting skill, and shawls overall offer a lot of value to us as knitters. However, I do think that there has been a completely irrational amount of controversy around different shawl designs and patterns over the years. I believe at the same time that knitting is an iterative art form that requires us to try things sometimes more than once in different color palettes to get it quite right. A lot of the different things that I'm referencing here up front about my feelings about what's going on with shawls, I'm going to try to show you through the knitting evolution of my own shawls that are stacked here beside me. So we're going to go to something I've knit more recently, but will actually take us, I believe, the farthest back in time design-wise, and talk about where these kind of shawls began and how we've ended up where we are, and how one man has kind of stuck to his own guns, and how a lot of different changes have happened. And helpfully, I also have a Sophie product that I've already shown you in one of these that we can use as another way to discuss another aspect of this particular reshaping of project style. Right out of the gate, I believe today the majority of people knitting are looking for knitting for a gateway for relaxation, and I think that is very, very good and definitely something it offers everyone who practices this beautiful art form. What I will say alongside that, flockers, is at the same time, different people have different needs from their knitting in order to feel that peacefulness. And shawls are great because they offer you a way to explore lots of different opportunities to find things that might work for you that you may not have considered before. I also can tell you that with the shawls in general, the more complex ones that are broken up into smaller pieces tend to knit more quickly and feel more achievable. There have been some overall tendencies in shawl knittings and some ebb and flows and things going on. And I think as well up front, I want to address price point. Across the board, the shawls that I'm going to show you take between 4 to 6 hand-dyed skeins of yarn. And today, globally, that is quite a high price point for something that you may not wear very much, and for something that I can tell you upon completion of several of these shawls did not use all of the yarn whatsoever. Now, a couple of them are the opposite case, but it was certainly something to note and to share with people as I considered what may have gone on with our knitting tendencies that's also led into this. So, first, as I said, people are definitely knitting for relaxation and to make things. I think a lot of people today, from what I'm seeing, are making garments or things that require overall less demand and attention to knit, and that there is a subset of people who are still out there for the more crazy long journeys that shawl knitting often represents. It's important to note that shawls often take longer and have more yarn in them than a jumper today, and that planning them and getting the colors right, as we'll look back on at the end for the 3 shawls that we're going to use to case study how to approach this and problem solve for these things for yourself or for different wardrobes, or to transition shawls from the way previous color palettes I think have been constructed in knitting into ones that may suit different eras of our wardrobes and different eras of our styles more sustainably over time without being boring. So let's go into the way, way back machine to talk to our good friend, Andrea Mowry, and talk about one of the shawls that I think represents a specific era of knitting, a beautiful thing to wear, a journey to knit. Definitely takes a lot of patience. This is my glorious What the Fade in the original egg yolk fade. It is ginormous and a triangle. The garter stitch rows at the end are a experience that makes you question whether or not it's worth it ever knitting again. I'm not gonna lie. This is something that I will never cast on and knit again. It is absolutely beautiful. It's designed by Andrea Mowry. It is a 6 skein fade shawl that goes through a brioche portion up top using a trick of alternating different brioche sections to create that fading effect, and then comes down into a beautiful garter marl fade that is incredibly effective in the original colors, which include Fly, Genie, Heyday, I think poppy somehow might be involved. I'm not remembering correctly. Wild card and certainly egg yolk. I really, really love wearing this. I really loved knitting the first 2/3 of it. The last third, as I said, was an adventure. I loved making the tassels and putting them on. However, this does take 6 skeins of yarn that in New Zealand dollars costs roughly $50 a skein. And I can be honest and say that in my shop, at least today, you could very easily knit 3 adult garments for that price or less, or multiple other things. And I think I can appreciate why, as prices on hand-dyed yarns and other things have moved up, that you definitely want an assured result in a great kit if you're going to take a risk on a pattern like this that takes this much yarn. I want to just stand here and say that is absolutely true. And I think that this has been a big effect on our knitting. The original layout and style kits often look so beautiful, and I'm so glad that I got one from Hedgehog Fiber and had them made, and that we made alternative kits as well, which were also fabulous and followed the same principles. But when we're trying to make yarn selections for something like this, we need options, and we need access to a lot of different colors of yarns and a lot of different hand-dyed yarns in a huge variety to have success. So you need a minimum of 6 skeins in different colors, and you're probably going to require, you know, I would say upwards of 40 colors to get to 6 successful ones to make a fade that goes in and out like this so well. And I think that's just important to note. Unless you're in a place that has access to high volumes of hand-dyed yarn and lots of different colors available all the time, the likelihood of being able to knit a shawl like this, or unless they curate kits, is just lower today. Hand dyers, like a lot of different aspects of things, are experiencing lots of change. And a lot of people who started hand dyeing 20 years ago may be actually retiring from the industry now, which is another change that we're seeing all over the place. Hand dyers have long driven kit development and other things in really creative and interesting ways and collaboratively with designers, and we still see those relationships flourishing all over. I do always like to mention my friend Helene, who owns Happy Go Knitty. I think she does fabulous work producing kits that go very well with designs, and she is somebody who has navigated the change in desires for knitters in what I think is an incredible way, and offers a great product with an absolutely skilled approach to producing repeat semi-solid colorways that I just think is great. And, you know, someone like that producing a kit for something like this, definitely worth buying into. But I think I can appreciate and understand for a lot of knitters today why approaching and tackling a project like this, given the way that yarn shops have changed and what the options available to you even at a knitting event today may be, and that kind of crunch time decision making that a knitting event gives, like trying to select 6 skeins that go together in a fade where you might need to go to more than one dyer to accomplish the task inside of the time demand of a yarn festival. That's a lot of work, actually. That's a lot to try to navigate and do. It's a lot of booths to visit, a lot of things to consider. And I think that unless you're finding things like this as kits today, sourcing the yarn and making the selection in a way that gives you confidence to move forward is a barrier today to why we are not seeing as many of these large multicolored faded shawls being knit, especially the ones that are more than like 5 colors or more. 4 is still, in my opinion, relatively reasonable, and we'll get to some 4 skein options that I think are absolutely great for that reason. One of the other shawl styles that I do think that we are seeing a decline of overall, which is neither good nor bad, it just is, which I really love, are these all sort of color changing spin cycle shawls. So this is, I can admit this, one of 3 night shift shawls that I have in my possession that I wear all the time. I really do love this pattern. I love the shawls that it produces, and I love making it in spin cycle, and specifically wearing it in spin cycle because I've only made this one of the 3 that I've knit. Now, I would say color palette wise, this is from deep in my candy obsession, where I was definitely just really indulging and playing in all of these beautiful pastel exaggerated shades. And it was super fun to make and knit. But again, in this particular case, I do believe that it is a little cost prohibitive. It does take 6 skeins of worsted weight color changing yarn. I think that it works best, quite frankly, in Dream State from Spin Cycle. We did used to retail it. If you're looking to get it now, you can find it in New Zealand at Lupine. I really loved making this. However, again, like this particular one here, getting an original kit for it is not particularly easy. Assembling all the original colors is challenging, and having access today to a yarn shop locally that has a big enough color selection, you can go in and look at enough Dream State to pick out 6 colors that you think are going to go together and make this effect well, unless you can see a kit of it already knit up, I think would be relatively challenging. And again, I think that access and selection point is what's making shawls like this more challenging to make, as they are so yarn forward, not necessarily particularly the cost, although it is worth noting that a lot of people who are knitting garments today could, again, get 2 to 3 garments potentially, and even more if they're knitting other things, for the same price as this shawl. And I do think that weighs upon that decision making as well. If it's both challenging to source and you're not 100% sure what the outcome is going to be because you can't see the skeins in person, and because with Spin Cycle you can't always tell how they're going to play out, and the same with hand dyed yarn and with some commercially dyed yarn, don't get me wrong. I think I understand the hesitancy that's led to a sort of shift in overall knitting habits, but I will say the night shift is worth knitting. It can be quite a risk to change the color palette up. I can admit that. This one didn't necessarily work out as smoothly as I was planning, but I do really love it still. And I do have 3 of them, so it's easy for me to change it up and go with different ones over time. But most people are going to knit one of these, so you only get 1 crack at it. And I think at that price point, only getting 1 crack, you're going to want a kit or an original. And again, that's, I think, the biggest barrier, sourcing the actual yarn to get there. So 6 skeins of hand dyed or 6 skeins of Spin Cycle all at once is probably going to be quite challenging to source, especially if you need a bunch of different colors in ways that you're going to put together well for yourself. Those are some big barriers to shawl knitting, but there are a lot of other shawls out there that may take advantage of what you have in your stash and may take advantage of other characteristics of yarn that I think are easier to work with than these particular ones. So I'm going to now show you 4, but technically 3 different shawls plus 1 shawl example that I think show a reference of how we can incorporate a more geometric and interesting thing into our wardrobe and planning through color selection and other things, how we can get access to better price points and more versatility out of those garments, and furthermore, how we can reinterpret a pattern we may already know and love to suit our changing wardrobe in a way that offers us a lot of longevity out of the wear. So let's talk about the Sophie hood, shawl, scarf, and the global demand for scarves and shawls that are simple and easy to make and beautiful to wear and soft right next to your neck, and what that says. I think that this says that people want something that is repeatable, beautiful, easy to take with them, easy to make, easy to style, and gives them a lot of reward and a chance to play with some beautiful yarns at a variety of different sizes. That means you can make different decisions and have the same outcome at different price points and get different levels of enjoyment or versatility or any other combination of pleasures out of it. So that's why I think this has become the dominant pattern. I think it addresses and answers a lot of different things across a lot of different spectrums of what knitters are looking for to wear and to knit, and I get it. I also believe that there's a lot of room inside of our knitting diets for other things, and that sometimes when we see things in a specific lens, it's hard, or colorway or other thing, it's very hard to see it differently and take a different approach to it so that we can still incorporate whimsy and fun and other things as one concept. We can also go a completely different way and get a totally different outcome, as I'm going to show you with a different piece. And finally, muted and subtle doesn't have to be boring, and those geometric shapes and muted, beautiful, high contrast colors will produce a crisp, classic shawl that will stand the test of time and may not be particularly difficult to knit. So let's start there with my, I think, 5th favorite thing that I knit in 2025, so we don't need to hear too much about it. So let's go back over that. Earth and Sky by Stephen West is an old pattern, takes a little bit of intarsia, and takes 6 skeins in total for this particular style of Road to China Light. The yarn does almost all the heavy lifting here. Now, this to me offers a medium place between where we're gonna go and where we started with that petite knit Sophie hood shawl. This has a lot of similar elements as far as the making. The intarsia is easy to do. The knitting is very simple to follow. The increases are regular and the same throughout. The pattern really only repeats twice. It's quite simple to make. As I said already, the cast on is very clear and quite simple to work through. And overall, the knitting experience is something I think most knitters will enjoy and will get a lot of value out of, and a shawl that will be great value to wear. You could easily purchase only 2 colors and use something out of your stash. You probably have 3 colors in roughly 250 to 300 meters of fingering weight yarn in your stash already. This is a great way to start possibly using up some leftovers of things that you've already made. Using leftovers from garments that we've made into shawls especially can give us something that's really cohesive in our wardrobe that goes with a lot of different things when paired with a neutral. So for example, if you had a series, let's say you've made 3 or 4 different, or 5, it doesn't matter, bright garments recently, you could go through and switch out all of these intarsia ones for all those different brights and different things, and then come through with all of the different breaking up portions in a neutral that ties them all together, a camel, a gray, a cream, and get a lot of wear out of this for not a lot of work, and incorporate things from your stash while mixing together a new purchase to give you the most amount of value out of that knitting. And that's, I think, a lot of a better way to approach a shawl like this. Alternatively, you can knit a tasteful one, in my opinion, in refined all neutrals that creates a glamorous base to pair this accessory with anything else, making it a soft, beautiful piece of luxury for yourself that goes so well with everything that it pays for itself instantly, because you know you're going to wear it all the time for the warmth, for the softness, and for the fact that it just gives that little touch of softness and beauty to that overall wardrobe decision. This sort of shawl knitting, I think in many ways is much closer to the shawl knitting that goes on for something like this, and is a great gateway in. Now, I also said in that section about using up little bits, and Stephen West is a great person to use up little bits with because of his modular constructions. There were lots of little bits that went into the construction of this for me by someone, which is really beautiful, and it demonstrates one of my key principles of working with West knits. When in doubt, use cream. If something that you think is going to be really busy is going to go on, I would always advise to you to consider the immortal words of Coco Chanel: take something away, take one thing away. And by taking out a color and introducing a neutral, overall, you can then use a lot of different color and variegated yarns and other things that have high contrast that still creates a soft and beautiful palette that is timeless and will go with everything and has the look of a more kind of beach mosaic aesthetic than it does necessarily a bright and garish look. Lots of different beautiful colors of hedgehog fiber come through here with 2 different shades of Baby Bandit from Outlaw Yarn in both a cream and a coral. And the overall effect of that cream background just really brings that softening effect to everything and gives it kind of a crisp, neutral, modern aesthetic with that confetti of other brights throughout. It means that it's really easy to wear because of all the variegation in the beautiful shades selected with a lot of different things. For example, it pairs actually quite well with this cardigan, and it goes really well with Bobo. So this sort of thing where we use a neutral that is quite complementary to our total wardrobe to tame and harness other brights that we might have is another approach, and is the same iteration of the approach that I already mentioned, but showing you it splayed out in a busier stitch pattern with a lot more going on in how, even when rendered in a bright confetti of colors across a very busy stitch pattern, the calming effect of the neutral background or a color background that suits your overall wardrobe base, and then playing into that with lots of other things, makes a item that is both a joy to knit and a pleasure to wear, and something that enhances and adds to every outfit. I would say as well, a shawl like this is a more casual item as compared to the Road to China light shawl, and nothing, in my opinion, will ever beat the kind of elegance of a true all lace shawl, especially if you do have a tasteful beading array throughout it that can be quite beautiful and painstaking to knit. So this is Slip Stitch Stravaganza by Stephen West, and if you go online and look, there are lots of different examples of this knit very beautifully. One solid main color throughout and lots of little bits of pop is definitely a great approach that shifts the burden of the color balance into that main color, which I think makes it a more easy and accessible knit. Even if you need slightly more yarn, you can shop your stash and do a lot more with a shawl knit in this method. A lot of Stephen's shawls have this modular-esque or portions construction in mind. And so there are also many of them that use different slipping stitch techniques and other things can be a great way to use up your brights and your odds and ends to get more out of your knits when you combine it with something beautiful as a base that really hones that in. I will say as well, something with a little bit of silk can always add that contrast as well in the texture visually to the yarns and give a little bit more attention to your base yarn and make these background pastels or brights or however you decide to do that have a little bit more of a recessed look as they will be more matte as well in most yarns. Finally, what's happened with shawl knittings and how do we get back to it? So the insanely brightly colored candy era of yarn and all of that, I think has been not dwindling or shifting, but always going through a refinement and a change of aesthetic as taste over time changes. And I think the two shawls I'm going to show you are a great example of taste over time changing and both being beautiful and stunning and artistically great, but one of them having a more classic color-based element to it that draws inspiration from multiple different decades and will give it a lot more wearability in the long term, I think. Both of these shawls are You Rock by Suzanne Summer. They require a 3 skein fade, which I think is quite reasonable to achieve today compared with the 6 skein fade as mentioned earlier, which is why I think these are a great part of knitting. It works just fine in a solid or semi-solid yarn or lightly speckled as I'm about to show you. And then you need 1 contrasting skein. So that is great because it means that you can shop from a different dyer. You can use a commercially dyed solid. You could do a lot of different things. There's no wrong approach. You could even, I guess if you wanted, Zauberball or something at the end of this. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that personally. Given what I'm about to show you, I would recommend semi-solids to solids as a 3-color fade with a beautiful contrast because I think that's the way that I'm going to be approaching this shawl if I ever knit another one. Sorry, French Bulldog head must be supported. They are, by the way, like having a baby for the rest of your life. They never grow out of this, it turns out. That's why Bobo has been on my lap for all of these videos. So this little beauty here is my original You Rock, and every time I see it, I smile because I had an absolute play with the colors on this. Now, pink is certainly a well-documented part of my color spectrum, as is the teal and green sort of sections, but the purple is something I wanted to play with, and I kind of have always conceptualized this as sort of a mermaid sort of aesthetic, but that's less interesting to me over time. And I just really love how the yarns play out. And this is a great example of having access to lots of different yarns from a company to make a big fade immediately and how easy and accessible that was. And I loved knitting this and I loved wearing it. And I have a kind of pastel era that this goes well with. But unlike the Slip Stitch Stravaganza that I still get quite a lot of wear out of, I find this one sits in a drawer. The speckling on it is beautiful and stunning, and I love the yarn, and I think it's a gorgeous example, and it may go back to the shop as a sample now for a long time. It shows you what you can really do with the yarn and push the limits, and there's a huge amount of space in people's wardrobe for this. But overall, in the last couple of years, I've been angling towards a more muted silken greens and more robust peaches and other things into my wardrobe. And I don't have as many garments that I can wear this with any longer, which has led to it sitting. Now, the good news is I knit a different one, which gets quite a bit more wear. And You Rock is an awesome pattern for showing you this contrast because I've knit 2 of them and they are so different. And I mean, actually so different for one, because I do have a bit of a tendency to knit very similar things. So this is done in Yarn Floozy, the Savant base. This one was knit in Hedgehog Fiber and Insomnia, Danube, Beach Bunny, and Rose Hip as the contrast. Where this one, and I'm gonna get one of the colors wrong because I Oh. I should remember because I have more of it in a bin behind me, but I can't. So this is pink grapefruit um, and to ambrosia as a fade on the top, which is 3 semi-solid / lightly speckled colors. And to, I want to say that it's Baroque, but I think I'm very wrong. At the hem, just a dark, beautiful purple, all in a silk merino blend from Yarn Floozy. 3 colors that I thought just made a beautiful, beautiful fade. And then into this gorgeous dark contrast. And you can see how I've said before that these kind of more refined and sophisticated palettes have a lot more play and room inside of my current wardrobe. And even with this particular garment, I wouldn't necessarily pair these together. I think that the colors work well together. Katrine at Yarn Floozy is somebody who dyes spectacular yarns that work very, very well together, that make incredible shawls. I've knit a lot of shawls in her yarns that I find wildly wearable. She has a sophisticated and interesting color palette that tones in well with a lot of commercially dyed yarns, and also just has an interesting, I want to describe it as a warm moodiness. There is a mood to it, but the mood is not a sad moodiness. It can be a dark and a mysterious moodiness, but it is a comforting and enriching moodiness to her approach to color. The moodiness makes you feel rested and invigorated, like the comfort of a warm bed on a crisp morning before the sun is up. If that at all brings to mind the kind of moodiness of color that she creates. And I think that it just plays out well and shows a really big dynamic evolution in my color palette and knitting between 2 different shawls that I love so much each, and I loved the making of both. But we can see, and I think it's fair to say that overall, for kind of a classic longevity in shawl knitting, shawls take a lot of yarn and they are very consuming to knit, that I think this one over time will get a lot more wear, than this particular one. And largely this speaks to me to the larger thing about what's going on with shawls at the moment. Now, there is always a space for things like this, and I think they are completely fabulous, obviously. And a shawl like You Rock that only requires a 3 skein fade and a border is going to be much easier to achieve than a 4 skein or 6 skein fade at an event. So going with a plan of something like this that is achievable and knittable, where you can explore and play with color and have a beautiful time at events like that, where I think today will be the best place to source lots of hand-dyed yarn overall, is going to unlock this sort of shawl knitting. The days of the 6 skein easily accessible fade may not be as available, but there are still lots of great ways to approach it by combining neutrals together with other things to make more depth, playing with different colors over time, and again, possibly reevaluating the colors that we have in our own wardrobe and how we may want to approach those going forward. So this has been my little dive into shawl knitting, and I do think that things like the Petite Knit Sophie Scarf and Sophie Shawl are worth knitting for a lot of knitters out there today. They can be really beautiful and great pieces in a lot of different wardrobes, and you shouldn't shy away from them just because I have not been their biggest fan historically. I think they represent a look toward comfort and knittability and wearability and longevity and style and minimalism that a lot of the other things I showed you today, if executed in different colors or with slightly fewer skeins required, maybe something that fits in well into your knitted wardrobe as well. I can say also that many of the things I showed you today do turn out very beautifully in all solid colors, which depending on the shades selected, can definitely produce an incredibly robust and ephemeral look that you may really, at the same time, which you may really come to enjoy. You can also play with texture with a lot of these different shawls, introducing, you know, a brush suri or a silk mohair or many other things that may give you a lot of things that tie into your wardrobe in that aesthetic. Bearing in mind, a lot of what I'm saying is generalizations here, and I think that there's a lot of space for a lot of different things to be knit over time still, but if we're looking at the way things are trending, I think these sorts of shawls, focusing on the ones that are more knittable and accessible, are certainly worthwhile. Thank you so much for joining me in Bobo today. I hope all of you enjoyed this, and as I mentioned, I am away at the moment, so I hope all of you are having a wonderful time, and if you have any questions, please send them on through to the shop. The email address there now is help@getflocked.co.nz. I may have said it in the preamble, but if you could please like and subscribe, I would super appreciate it. Thank you so much and have a beautiful day. Bobo, you're very pathetic. Did you know that? Okay, Daddy has to get up again.